Good afternoon. The first thing I'd like to cover before I even introduce myself is to tell you that the restrooms are straight out this door and down the hall. My name is Valerie Sherrer, and this is Eric Hardy, and we work on NSLDS. And that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. Today we're going to talk about enrollment reporting. Normally we do a session that is only on enrollment reporting, but we think we've done enough in emphasizing the importance of enrollment reporting. So today we're going to focus on some of the lessons we learned in 2017, and we're going to talk about some of the enrollment reporting tools. I'm going to do a little reminder about gainful employment reporting. And then Eric's going to talk about all the new things that we've done on NSLDS, and those are things on Perkins reporting, 150% updates, student eligibility. We've made some enhancements. We're really excited about our organization profile page that we hope that you're using. We now offer the ability to do award searches, and Eric's going to tell you a little bit about that. We've done some enhancements to our reports, and we have a way for you to view which loans have been discharged through Veterans Disability, and we just want to make sure that you're aware of that. We're going to talk about what's coming, and that's with our college scorecard. You're going to be able to get backup data, and Eric's going to tell you about that. And then we're going to just do our normal reminders about reporting accuracy to NSLDS. So I get the pleasure, again, of talking about enrollment reporting. And what I want to talk about is some of the lessons we learned in 2017. And those lessons were that schools didn't want us to populate their enrollment rosters with transfer student monitoring and financial aid history students. I'm going to talk about that in more detail. We're going to talk about what terminal status is W, G, and D, and how syncing them up and reporting withdrawal at the campus level versus the program level, and some of the issues we've had with that. We're going to continue to remind you about reporting published program length correctly, and we're going to talk about some of the tools we have for enrollment reporting. So a big lesson that we learned in 2017 is when we were working with schools on why some of them were not reporting at the 90% threshold. That means that 90% of the students on their enrollment rosters must have program level data reported. We found that a number of schools were complaining that by adding students from their transfer student monitoring and from their financial aid history requests, they were having to do too much research to find out the status of those students, and so often the updates were not made on those students, and it impacted their statistics. So what we decided to do after several schools complained was to not add those students to the enrollment rosters anymore. So we're not adding transfer student monitoring students that are on your transfer student monitoring report, but not on your enrollment roster report. We're no longer adding them to your rosters. However, as soon as we did that, we had schools call us and say, why did you stop doing that? So what we're doing now is we're working on making some enhancements to the system, and we hope by this spring that enhancements will be done, and you will be able to go back and make the choice of whether you want to add students from transfer student monitoring or students from financial aid history or students from both of those reports to your enrollment rosters, and we will do it for you. So we're going to give it to you as an option. Another issue that we found in working with schools on why they weren't meeting that 90% threshold was the issue of we have a concept on NSLDS that you have to report a withdrawal status or a terminal status from NSLDS from either a program or at the campus level 2 times. So in this example, we're demonstrating where a student was full-time, then he was full-time, but he graduated from a particular program, so you reported the first G. And then when that student graduated in April from both the campus, and again, they're reporting the program that he 2 times, then NSLDS was requiring that the campus level reporting of 2 times be reported. So We find that a number of schools were having issues with the way NSLDS required that both the campus and the program level reported at 2 times, and we find it is a problem that we are correcting, but as it stands today, the school must report the program 2 times in a terminal status, and that's whether the student has withdrawn, graduated, or died. You have to report it twice at both the campus level and the program level. But what we think we need to do, and before we turn the letter reporting process back on, is we need to fix it so that if a student has graduated or withdrawn or died from a program, and you tell us about it once at the program level, we need to just accept it once. And we think that that will help schools improve their statistics. So until we make that enhancements, we're not going to turn back on our letter generations for students, for schools not meeting the 90% threshold. Another lesson that we continue to learn and to monitor is reporting months and weeks for programs that are at a 2 or 4 year program, traditional levels. We're also still having issues with schools reporting the implied decimal point in the program level. I know it's a little confusing. So all of these errors are causing issues with students and their 150% eligibility rules. So what we're seeing still is that when published program lengths are reported in months for an associate degree or a bachelor degree, it causes us to miscalculate the number of years, because what we do is we take those months and convert it to years, and we're using a 32-week program length when we're calculating the number of years. And so it causes to be an askew. For example, in this misreporting of a program that is 4 years, when you give it to us in 48 months, again, we calculate that out to be 6.4 years, because again, we're using a 32-week year in our program lengths. So we're asking and we're reminding schools that if you have a traditional program length that's either 2 or 4 years, please report that in years so that NSLDS does not have to do that calculation. When it's reported correctly, as demonstrated in this slide, 4 years becomes 4 years, and that prevents the student from having an erroneous amount of time for the published program length in our actual calculation of remaining eligibility. We also heard from schools that they needed more tools about understanding what data that they've reported and how they can improve their data quality. So NSLDS has created a number of tools that are going to help you understand better about what you have reported. We also have done updates on the school compliance notifications. We found that when you're getting the compliance letters that you needed more information. And we heard several times at the conference that you wanted us to talk to your registrars because they are the ones who are reporting enrollment data to NSLDS in many cases. We continue to struggle with schools who are not meeting our 90% threshold. So all of those numbers of schools reported in the red are all the schools that are having issues still reporting program level data to NSLDS. And again, we expect it to be at your 8-digit campus location at your reporting level, that 90% of the students on your enrollment rosters should have a program. What we did to grab the attention of the schools that were not reporting properly is in April, May, June, and July, we sent out compliance letter to those schools who were not meeting our 90% threshold levels. So we ended up sending 1,365 letters to schools. And you can see if your school had an issue with reporting at the 90% threshold level by looking on NSLDS under the enrollment tab. You're going to be able to see whether or not your school received a letter. And in fact, you can hit view that letter, and you can actually see the letter that we sent to your financial aid officer and to the contact information we had on NSLDS about enrollment reporting. So the letter went to 2 people. The first letter we plan to go to 2 people at your institution. And again, we ask that you update your enrollment reporting contact information on NSLDS because that's where we directed the letter to. And we also directed to the financial aid financial aid officer of your institution to let you know that you're not meeting our 90% threshold level, and that if improvements are not done, you'll get a letter 2 and 3. But again, we turned our letters off because we want to continue to work with schools to improve the data that we're monitoring and the way that we're collecting it before we hit you with another round of letters. If you didn't receive a compliance letter, which should be the goal of every school, you'll see also an informational icon just to let you know that you don't have a compliance reporting issue and no letters have been sent. And that eye on this page simply shows you that you are in compliance and have not received a compliance letter. We also created a process, and this is something that we heard from you at the conference last year, was there are many reasons that some schools are not going to meet that 90% threshold simply because of their student populations, where they have a large continuing education community, or there's some kind of special circumstances or programs they're working with in their particular schools, or even from natural disasters. You're not going to meet the 90% threshold level. So what we did is we formed an internal committee at FSA that is comprised of our compliance area, policy, and NSLDS. And what we do is we take those schools who have contacted us at this email address at ercompliance@ed.gov, and we work with the schools collecting information about their particular campuses. And that committee, with compliance leading our review, we simply evaluate all the information that you've provided us with us. And if we find there is a reason that you should not be at the 90% threshold levels, we will change that on NSLDS so you won't get a compliance letter or you won't get the warning icon that you're below in the monthly statistics that we calculate, that you're below the threshold because we have lowered your threshold based on the information collected in our evaluation process. So if you're having an issue with your campus, and when you look at your monthly statistics and you feel that you can't meet the 90% threshold simply because of the way your campus, of the type of students on your campuses, then you can start with contacting us at that email address, and we'll work with you individually to evaluate your school's concerns. We also have a number of tools that we've given schools because enrollment reporting is so important to the monitoring of the 150% eligibility for the student, for the government, and our ability to pay subsidy for students, to loan servicing. We wanted to make sure that you had a number of tools so that you can analyze your data to ensure proper reporting. And this is just a list of some of the tools that we offer you. And then these are the online tools. In addition, we have several reports that you can request by batch. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of them, or 3 of them. But these are some of the reports that you can request in batch that will help you analyze how your school is doing in properly reporting enrollment data. One of the reports that we talked about at last year's conference that we actually got up and running was the ability for schools to see their individual error reports so that you can see the students that have errors. And again, we send out the enrollment roster. You have 15 days to comply, or your servicer has 15 days to comply with reporting back to us. Then when we send the errors to you, you have 10 days to respond to those errors. And we want you to correct as many errors as possible. And this gives you the ability to see what those errors are. And this is especially useful for you if you have an enrollment servicer, and will help you prevent any issues with compliance during school audits. The other report that we offer and that we wanted schools to have is to look at the students who actually have program data reported. We've always had the report, the SCR 4 report, which was to tell you how many students from your campuses were on the enrollment roster. So that report is done at the campus level. Now we've created the 8 report that allows you to see which students are reported with programs at the program level. So you can compare students that are on your SCH ER4 report, enrollment report, to show at the campus level, and when you compare it to students that are at the program level, any student not having, you can see which students don't have programs by comparing the 2 reports. We also heard from schools that they wanted to understand where we were getting the enrollment data that comes on the enrollment roster. And again, that data starts when COD reports disbursement information to NSLDS. So we've created a report, the SCHE10 report, that allows you to compare the enrollment data that we're collecting from COD versus the enrollment data from NSLDS. This screen shows that all of these students came from COD reporting. That's what the C represents under source of information. The number 2 on this screen shows you the information that on the first row that the student was reported from COD with a published program length of 2 for the same program, and it hasn't been certified yet. On the enrollment rosters, but we also have certification from the school on our enrollment rosters for a published program length of 1, and it's been certified, and under source you see the S. So that's telling us that on your enrollment roster for this particular student, you have 2 separate programs, one with a program length of 2 and one with 1. And the issue is that correct? Are both, as a student, actually attending both programs? You'll see in the example of number 3 that this same another student is being reported with all of these programs have been certified on your enrollment roster through the enrollment roster process for the same program zip code, but they're all different programs because one has a published program length of 4 years, another has 6.4 years, and then we have the credential level is changed. So just remember that a program is made up of SIP, the credential level, and the published program length. Now, the question is this student really in 3 programs, or have there been errors made in reporting this student to NSLDS, and now the student is on NSLDS with 3 different program lengths? Those are the kind of things that we need you to carefully review and correct if wrong. The other thing that when we published the letters, many schools said, how did you come up with the statistics of why my school was below the 90% threshold level? We need to know the data that you're using. So what we've come up with is a report that will show you what your latest statistics. So remember, there's a statistics page on NSLDS, and it shows you your reporting level for each of your enrollment rosters for the month. The 3rd Wednesday of every month, we calculate your school's performance on reporting statistics. If we find for that month that you are below 90%, you're going to get a warning icon that you're not reporting at a satisfactory level for the number of programs. If you want to know why you're reporting below that, why you got that statistics, and you want to examine the students that are involved in our calculation, you'll simply request this report, and it will show you the students that made up the denominator, all the students on the roster, and the number of students that were reported without a program, so that you can, and the number of students reported with a program, so that you could calculate why students don't have, why you're below the 90% threshold. So we just thought this would be another tool to help you improve your enrollment reporting. We, on our enrollment maintenance page, we like to give you warning icons that if you're late, we require that you report every 60 days. If you're 65 days late in returning a report or greater in returning an enrollment roster, we are going to put the warning icon that you're late in reporting. We also have the icon next to the student's data. When you want to know where did you get this program information from, that eye will tell you that that data came from COD and has not yet been certified by the campus on the enrollment roster. One of the things that we heard, and we've heard for several years, is that you talk to us as financial aid officers about enrollment reporting, but for many campuses, enrollment reporting is done by the registrar's office. So one of the things that we did, and we wanted to do before Jeff Baker left us, is that we we sat down and we worked with and met with ACRO to do a presentation to registrars. We worked with the National Student Clearinghouse and with FSA and ACRO, and we put together a webinar that was directed directly to the registrars. We demonstrated tools that were on NSLDS that was there for their use. We encouraged the registrars to work with the financial aid officers, and we're very disappointed that we're finding that the registrars see NSLDS as a tool for the financial aid office, but not as a tool for their use. And we want to encourage them because enrollment reporting impacts a student in so many ways that we want the registrars to have the ability to look on NSLDS, update NSLDS, or use the tools to monitor their enrollment reporting. So we had a very good session with ACRO. I would encourage your registrars to look at the presentation. We did a Q&A session. We put all the questions and answers out on the ACRO website, and I would encourage you to encourage your registrars to go and to look at the information from that webinar. The last thing I want to talk to you about is gainful employment. And this is just a reminder of the dates that you should have reported your information for the 16-17 award year by October 1st. But this is also to remind you, last year when we did the completers list and we gave an opportunity for schools to make corrections to the data they already reported, we found that there were thousands of corrections that needed to be made. When you made those corrections on the completers list, it did not go back. Unfortunately, we didn't have it linked up to our system so that any information you did for that completers list was actually put into the system. So we'd like to remind you that if you made corrections on your completers list, you need to go back into NSLDS and make the same corrections on the data that you reported, because that information was just on that completers list. We will be going through the completers list process again, and until you get something published from us in a electronic announcement, you still have the opportunity to update your data and to make sure that it is all correct before we go with the next round of calculations. Because once we send the completers list to Social Security, we can't make any corrections. So it's very important that you make sure all of the information that was changed on your completers list and the review of the data that you reported for this current year is correct, and you have the opportunity until we say it's time to cut off the process to make those corrections. Now I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to give you updates about all the other wonderful things we've done this year.
All righty. Can everyone hear me all right? A few years ago, we got halfway through a presentation before we realized the audience couldn't hear anything we were saying. So big lesson learned was to always check. Cynthia at the federal update talked a little bit about Perkins reporting to NSLDS, and I thought it might be helpful, at least for Valerie and I, if you are a school that has a Perkins portfolio, can you raise your hand for me? Okay, fantastic. And how many of you guys use a servicer to report your Perkins data to NSLDS? So most of you. How many don't? How many do it yourselves? What I expected, just one or two, maybe three hands. So we're going to talk a little bit about Perkins reporting and how, with the wind down and also in conjunction with some of the data quality issues we've been seeing around Perkins, how you can take a look and see what your Perkins portfolio looks like on NSLDS. But before we do that, we do want to talk a little bit about some changes we've made this year to make it easier on a specific to use a specific report to look at your portfolio. So when a school is either liquidating or assigning a Perkins loan to the department for collections work, the school reports that Perkins loan in an AE loan status. So schools are required to continue to report on that loan until the department servicer, whether that's ECSI, the Perkins servicer, or default management collection system, or I should also mention TPD, until either one of those three organizations begins to report on the loan, you are still responsible for continuing to update that loan. So typically, we refer to that internally as the handshake. The handshake is you putting the loan into an AE loan status, and then either DMCS, TPD, or ECSI coming behind and actually saying, yep, we got that loan, and now we're servicing that loan. So along those lines, what we did on the REC 005, the Perkins Reconciliation Report, is we did make a new category so that you can specifically identify in this reconciliation report those loans that are in limbo, where you have put the loan into an AE loan status. So you've said, yep, department, you have this loan, but the department has not yet said, yep, we agree we have this loan. The department being TPD, DMCS, or ECSI. So we wanted to make that a little bit clearer in the reconciliation report so that you can identify that exact portfolio of loans that are in limbo. This is also really, really helpful for schools that are in process of liquidation, so that you can specifically see, as you're working through your liquidations, what have you gotten put into the AE loan status and what has not been put into the AE loan status. So as we talk about wind down over the next few years, having our arms wrapped around the status of the Perkins portfolio on NSLDS is going to be rather important. One other change we made to the reconciliation report is that if a loan is in DI or DS, those are our disability statuses, and the outstanding principal balance is 0, we're no longer going to consider those open loans. So these typically go back to the original disability discharge requirements. This was pre-TPD, so this is back when we were doing CDD-TS, as well as pre-CDD-TS loans as well. So we just wanted to make sure we are properly identifying those in the reconciliation report for you as well. So this reconciliation report, why are you telling us about it? You know, I use a third-party servicer, they're taking care of all of our reporting, and everything should be good. Well, what Cynthia told us in the federal update is that everything's not good. So what we encourage schools to do, and we made the same note last year in the NSLDS update, is to take a look at that reconciliation report, and it will produce for you a listing of all of your Perkins loans and all of the various data elements that are reported on those specific Perkins loans. You heard Cynthia mention that she was seeing Perkins loans that were in an in-school status for 20 years. Well, this reconciliation report is a useful tool to identify those loans. Once you've run that reconciliation report and you import it into a spreadsheet, that is the exact same format that we use to upload data into the system. So if you were to take that spreadsheet, import your loans, and decide, oh, that loan should be in a closed loan status, not in an open loan status, you can make that update to the spreadsheet and upload it right to the website. And we will process it in real time, and you can see whether or not that hit any errors. One note, if you are using a third-party servicer though, and you were to go out there and make that update, and then the third-party servicer says, nope, that loan's still open, they will wipe out what you've done. So it's probably pretty important that if you are gonna do that, you're coordinating with the third-party servicer to ensure that neither one of you are overriding the work that the other is doing. But we do encourage you guys, as we're looking at wind down, as we're looking at data quality, to go ahead and start at least getting your arms and getting a view into what your portfolio looks like on an NSLDS. We also want to mention that we did put out a new version of data prep. So I know most of you guys, there was only 2 people that raised their hand, or 2 or 3 schools that do Perkins reporting themselves. So this is that slide for those 3 people. All of the rest of you are probably not all that interested in this. But this is the software that, we put out a new version of the software that is used to create the files for reporting to NSLDS. So we are definitely on a very early version of Windows, so we wanted to make that update for you guys. All right, so typically when we do the NSLDS update, we tell you about everything we've done in the past few years and then everything that we're gonna do in this coming year. This year, instead of doing everything that's been completed and telling you everything that's coming up, we're gonna do it by subject area. So I'm gonna tell you about stuff we've done in given subject areas this past year and what we're gonna do this year in that subject area. So the first subject we're gonna talk about is 150%, SULA, always exciting, right? So right after the conference last year, we made a change to the subsidized usage page. So prior to this change, we did not tell you the date on which the loss of subsidy was effective. We just told you that a loan lost subsidy. And what we heard is, we don't understand why a loan's lost subsidy. So our very first step last year, so this is just a few weeks after the conference last year, was adding that date so that you can see what's the driving date for loss of subsidy. Having that date is very, very key and useful when researching to figure out what was the enrollment that triggered loss of subsidy. So, but that's all well and good that that date is there, but it's still pretty difficult to dig in and really figure out why a loan has lost subsidy. So to that end, we are implementing, and we're looking at March 2018 for this, what we're calling the MEP, or loss of subsidy timeline, maximum eligibility timeline. So to get to this new timeline page that we're debuting, very first time right here, you navigate to the enrollment summary page, and then you can see we'll have a new link to the maximum eligibility timeline. So this is a version of what the timeline is going to look like. So needless to say, SULA is complicated, and it's pretty darn difficult to understand at times. So one of the difficulties we have with the data is that historical data as well as current data is always changing that impact a borrower's eligibility for subsidy on their loans. So in order to accommodate that complicated view of the information, we've created what we're calling slices. So we have slices of time. Within each slice of time, you are going to see all of the information that was current during that time period. So at the very first slice, that's the highest slice on the screen here, that's the information that was current in this example, which we know it's fake data because this is 2007, 2008. But this would have been both the enrollment as well as the usage that was used to drive the borrower's MEP and REP during that time period. If you were to look at a time period earlier, you can see before we only had one loan coming in with usage, one award, and one enrollment that was driving the MEP. If you look at the next, the higher one, you can see here, and this is the same student now, and you'll see some of the data is duplicated from the earlier slice because it's still relative to the borrower's current condition However, there is new data, so we've created a new slice that displays that. So I know it's a bit complicated, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to really wrap your arms around until it's there and live and you can really see it. But we wanted to go ahead and start to give you a feel for what it's going to look like as we're in the development process. Also wanted to show you a third slice of a bit more of a complicated example with loss of subsidy involved. So you can see in the far right corners, we have our favorite candy corn icons. And those icons are indicating what was the driver for loss of subsidy on this particular student within this slice of time. So again, I'm not going to go too in-depth on these screens today, but wanted to go ahead and start to give you a preview of what this is going to look like as we begin to roll it out. We do know and we feel your pain on how complicated it is to understand why some borrowers have lost subsidy on their loans. And oftentimes when we are researching some of these individual borrowers, it requires 2 or 3 of us to get together and really dig into it. So we're really hoping that this timeline is going to help make that a little bit easier in order to do that research. Also, while we're talking about 150, I do want to note that we do have a session. It's session 5, SULA misunderstandings and misreportings, where we're going to talk a bit more about some of the common problems we've seen in both the COD reporting as well as in the enrollment reporting that are impacting eligibility for subsidized loans on the COD side, as well as whether or not a loan can retain its subsidy on the NSLDS side. So if you have opportunity, I would encourage you to attend that session. I'll also be speaking for just a brief moment. So moving on to student eligibility for 2018-2019. So just like the last few years, there were very few changes that we made. So this was a pretty basic rollover for us. We will note that in the financial aid, the FAH request, we did go ahead and add the statutory and actual interest rates into FAH, and we did update an updated user guide as well as record layouts in this past August. So those are out there for you. In terms of the ICER, it was a straight rollover. There were no new codes, no new IDs this past rollover, and we're anticipating the same for 2018-2019. All right. So we did a rather large-scale project on our organizational profile page that had a lot of impacts, not only to this new one-stop shop page that we created, but also some downstream impacts to the various reports that are out there and available. So I'm going to walk you through some of those changes that we made and what it looks like. So we did create under the org tab a new organization profile link. That organizational profile link is going to have all of the various batch and report options, and in some cases links to those report options that your school has enrolled for with NSLDS. So again, it's on the org tab. It's the organizational profile link. Most schools are used to have, if you were to look on the org tab, you would have seen that school profile before. So this is additional information next to the school profile. So on the page, we are up at the top. You can see we have a link to your data provider schedule. So if you're a Perkins school, that's where we're calling you a data provider. So that will show you the schedule on which we expect to receive all of your Perkins reporting. And then if, of course, all schools are enrolled in enrollment reporting, so we link you right over into the enrollment reporting profile where you can see the services as well as the schedule that you're set up for in enrollment reporting. So first link is up there. Following that, you can see we have the scheduled reports section. Prior to this enhancement, all of the scheduled reports were under that school profile link and each individual report had its own block, and it was really confusing, and the page would be gigantic, almost as long as the FAFSA that the secretary unrolled this morning. So we wanted to clean that up and make it a bit cleaner. So we did go ahead and add a scheduled reports section. We're going to look at this a little bit more in depth because in addition to adding that section, we also added a ton of new reports, or not a ton of new reports, but we took a lot of existing reports and made those available to be scheduled as well. Then we can also see under the scheduled reports, we're going to list all of your batch services. So PDPAs, when we talk about active confirmation at the end of the session, you might want to keep this in mind, the school profile page as you're verifying TG numbers. And then the last thing we have at the very bottom is the transfer student monitoring profile. So truly, we're hoping that this is a one-stop shop where you can at least see or update all of your related NSLDS services that impact your school. So let's take a little bit closer look. So the scheduled reports page. So first thing you'll notice is under the red box, we're going to display any reports that you've already have scheduled. So if you want to add a scheduled report that's not already scheduled, you can simply use that drop down and we'll list all of the reports that you can select from. So if you had looked at this list a year ago, there would only be about 5 or 6 reports there. So we've added a number of reports and we're going to talk about those in a little bit later. But after you've selected, you select the individual report and out of the dropdown, and that's going to take you to the report profile update. So you're going to make the various selections, fixed width, comma separated value, what are pre-formatted report, the frequency on which you want the report, and most importantly, the TG number to which you want the report delivered to. So, also going to make a note here that we are allowing you only to send data to TG numbers associated with your school. So we're going to just remember that when we get, again, to talking about the PDPA checks as well as some privacy, student privacy stuff, we want to make sure that that data is going to the right people. So you do have the option of course, selecting which TG number it should go to. You hit submit, and then we're going to add it right there to the report profile. Of course, you also have the option not to add a report, but to adjust any of your selections there. So if you want to adjust any selection, you just click on the number to the left of the report, and then you can edit your preferences on that scheduled report. Again, gonna note that the batch services are available. Most of you know, and certainly the PDPAs know, that every interface that a school has with NSLDS is tied to a specific TG number. So here you can see all of the services and the associated TG number that the school has signed up for used for that particular service. So for example, the CDR, the sort of CDR notification package eCDR, in this example, it's going to that specific TG number. However, the gainful employment notification package is going to a different TG number. So we just think this might be a better way for you to manage and at least ensure that all of these various services are associated to the correct TG number. And by TG number, of course, that ends up associated to a person at your school as well. So certainly when it comes time to do that PDPA active confirmation, this could be very helpful in ensuring that you are directing information that you need to the right place within your institution. Again, we also mentioned when we looked at the larger page, is we do also allow the TSM profile. We've taken that out of its prior place so that you can also see that here in the one-stop shop. I think, you know, schools, we've been doing TSM for, well, I'm trying, TSM started the year I started in financial aid, so I think it was 19 years ago. So I know that you guys are already very familiar with transfer student monitoring and this TSM profile, but this is, again, we've moved it here to make it a little more convenient in that organization profile page so that you can see all the information as it is there. I know also occasionally we have other types of organizations that attend this session. So guarantee agencies, lenders, you guys also have views here on this organization profile. If you have any questions about that, you can catch us afterwards. So again, once you do determine if you want to update your TSM, it'll link you right into the traditional TSM profile update. All right, so one of I thought it was kind of a cool change we made this year, is that, but I'm kind of a nerd, so you can take that for what it's worth, is we do allow schools to do a direct search on an award ID now. So if you have an award ID, you no longer are required to enter in the 3 student identifiers to get to that particular award. So we know, of course, every direct loan has an award ID that's made through the COD, the origination disbursement process. So I'm pretty sure that most of you guys know what those award IDs are somewhere within your systems. So you do have the option of putting that award ID in directly on the main menu page, and it'll bring you right into the loan history. We also, once you are within the aid tab, we've also added that award ID search right underneath the 3 identifiers. So if you're already looking at one person, you want to skip to another award, you can just enter in that award ID. You know, and I don't vision most of you guys are going to type out all 21 letters or characters out of the award ID. I'm guessing mostly this is a copy paste situation where you're copying it out of one place and pasting it here so that you can do that search. Also want to point out that it does take you directly to the loan detail page, not to the loan history page that lists every loan. So if you do get to this loan detail page and you want to look at every loan, that's that loan history page, if you click that button after you've done the award ID search, that'll take you into that student view that you would normally see right away when you enter in the 3 identifiers. So we just want to point that out as well, that not only can you navigate to the individual loan directly, but then by using this link, you can navigate to the student view or the loan history view as well. Again, I thought it was pretty cool. Along with that organization profile page, I mentioned that we had implemented a number of new reports that are available to be scheduled. I keep saying new reports, they're newly scheduled reports. They were long time existing reports. In order to accomplish that, we had to do a bit of cleanup. Over the past 25 years, we had duplicated some message classes, used the same message class for different reports. We also had blurred some of our report IDs, so you couldn't necessarily tell based on the header and the file you received, well, did I request this specifically, or did this come through because we had scheduled it? So we wanted to, as we were taking the opportunity to add more, to go ahead and clean up that historical information a bit. So we did specifically, and you can see in the ad hoc ID column versus the scheduled ID column, is we did create distinct report IDs for any scheduled report. So I know for a lot of you guys, this is definitely the boring side of the stuff, but for your technical people, this is pretty important as you're looking at getting in large amounts of data. You want to make sure that you know which file it is that you're receiving so that you can do whatever it is you need to do with it. So we do want to point out that we do have new report IDs associated with all of these various reports, distinguishing whether or not it's scheduled or ad hoc. We also have new message classes, which we'll look at in a second. We're not going to discuss them. It's just here in the presentation so that you can hand it to your technical person in your office. Of course, we just saw that enhanced listing of reports on the organization profile. Along with that, one of the biggest things we've heard probably over the last 5, 6, 7 years is that the fixed width reports are great, but you prefer comma separated value reports. So while we were out there adding new reports to be scheduled, we made many of them available in CSV version where they were only available in fixed width. So that makes it really super easy to import that jumbly file right into Microsoft Excel or whatever your program is of choice, so that you can easily sort the data and get a better view of it. So we hope that helped. And then also we added headers and trailers to a number of those reports that did not have them before. So I already mentioned, along with that, we created new message classes. So here we're just highlighting where there are new message classes for different types of report, the fixed width versus CSV versus pre-formatted. Again, not really going to talk about this. This is just definitely some information that if you are the person importing reports or you have technical people in-house that are importing these reports off of SAIG, you probably want to make sure that they know about all these different message classes, or you might be missing some data. One of the other kind of neat things we did is on the report list, you can see some of these reports have a green S or a red S next to them. So if the S is red, that means that there is a version of that report that can be scheduled and your institution has not scheduled it. If it's green, that indicates that your institution has created a schedule for that report. If there's no S, so it's not red or green, that means that report's not available to be scheduled. So if you click on the S, whether it's green or red, it's going to bring you into that profile update that we looked at a few minutes ago, and you can go ahead and create it to be scheduled, or you can update an existing parameters that you've set. So we think that's a pretty cool feature as well. Now you not only can see it on that organizational profile, but if you're out there on the reports tab, you can see all of the whether or not it's available and whether or not your institution has selected it. So I also mentioned we added a number of CSV reports, so we've gone ahead and listed here for you those reports that are now available in CSV. So that's delinquent borrower, borrower demographic, borrower default summary. So that's an old report that's been around for years and years and years. The 36-month repayment info loan record detail report, that's a mouthful. We went ahead and created that in CSV version, as well as the date entered repayment report. Also mentioned that we did update and create headers and trailers on all of those files. And one other note, we didn't make any substantive changes to any of the reports this past year, except for school portfolio. We went ahead and added the statutory and actual interest rates into the school portfolio. We did that back in April. So, by show of hands, how many institutions have been in a change of affiliation situation? I'm not expecting that many. So none is what I'm seeing, or maybe one or two in the back. So, oh, definitely one over here. We are creating a new report. We anticipate it being released in January 2018, that essentially, if you are a school that's had a change of affiliation, this gives you a version of the delinquent borrowers report that includes the borrowers associated with the prior school. So this will be helpful as you're managing delinquent borrowers from a school that has been that is now affiliated with your school, and making sure that you're taking a look at those delinquencies and being prepared for cohort default rates. So one of the things that we don't often talk about at the NSLDS update session, but we definitely wanted to tell you about some of the cool work we're doing, is on veterans disability. So I know that it's a smaller program today, but we are looking at doing some new stuff. So one of the things we want to point out that if there is any sort of discharge on a loan, we do put this little D icon next to the loan period page, the loan period information to indicate that a discharge exists on this loan. So that's all well and good, but when you want to dig in and get a little more information, it's in that activities for loans section, and then you can see down here at the bottom, we have discharge information. So this particular student had a DI-01 discharge. So what does that mean? That means the borrower had did I say ID-01? No, I did say DI-01. So that means this borrower had a disability discharge. Today, this DI-01 could mean that the borrower went through TPD. It could also mean that the borrower got a veteran's discharge. So we don't designate based upon that code, whether it's veteran's discharge or whether it's traditional TPD discharge. So one of the cool things that we're doing right now, and we're in the middle of the project as we speak, is we're setting up a new exchange with the Veterans Administration that they're going to begin to report to us all of their veterans that have experienced a disability that meets certain criteria. If the veteran has experienced that disability, they're going to report that to NSLDS, and then NSLDS in turn is going to reach out to TPD and get TPD involved so that they can reach out to the veteran and proactively offer the disability discharge without the veteran having to go through the effort to do the other way. So we're really excited about this. But along with that project, we are going to create two new discharge types. So where we saw that DI-01 was applicable to both TPD and to veterans, we are going to create two new VA discharge types. One will indicate that the student went through a traditional VA discharge. The other will identify that the student went through this new VA discharge process that we're creating. So why do you guys care about that? If you were to get the school portfolio report or any other report that includes the discharge data, you need to know about those two new discharge codes, or else if you import the data, it's not going to make much sense. So I just wanted to go ahead and tell you about those new codes that are coming up, but then also tell you about this neat project that we're really excited about with the Veterans Administration. So it's always really cool when government's reaching across agency to make the lives of students easier. So we're super excited about that. College scorecard. So Cynthia mentioned a bit, again, in the federal update about the data quality, and scorecard was one of the things she mentioned. There's not a whole lot to tell you at this point, but in 2018, so much later in 2018, NSLDS will begin to manage a portion of the college scorecard calculations. So that's going to include the repayment rate, the completion rate, and the median loan debt. So along with that, are you not only going to be able to see those rates on NSLDS, but will also provide all the backup detail for those rates so you can see the individual loans and borrowers that go into the creation of all of the measurements that are included in the college scorecard. So there's going to be a ton more information coming out about this later in 2018, but we wanted to make sure we were putting that on your radar now, that there are going to be some shifts. One of the things we definitely heard about the existing scorecard is that you want to see all of the data that makes up those rates. So by moving it to NSLDS, we're able to provide that information to you in the future. So I want to make a couple reminders, and Cynthia talked a bit about this morning around student privacy. So I've also kind of hinted at it as we were talking about those scheduled reports. So one of the things that we want to remind you guys is that NSLDS is definitely protected data and needs to be treated under the private, everything under Privacy Act, FERPA, all that good stuff. It's all applicable. So just to drive it home a little bit further, what does that mean? That's any borrower or loan level data that comes from NSLDS. Any person data that's coming off the system needs to be protected appropriately. This is also any usage on our websites. So if you're clicking around on the website and showing that to all of your friends, that might not be an appropriate usage. You want to make sure that you're protecting that appropriately. This also includes data that comes off of reports. So I talked a bit about those scheduled reports, and we allow you to put any TG number associated with your institution. So if the data is sent to a TG number associated with your institution, again, it needs to appropriately be protected also. And this also includes batch distribution. So this is your enrollment reporting, who's on your roster, financial aid history requests. This is all related to privacy data. So along with that, if you're an institution that is using a third-party servicer that's receiving information from NSLDS, so if you have designated your third-party servicer's TG box as the recipient of any of those scheduled reports, you are responsible for ensuring that your third-party servicer is only doing what is intended to be done and that it is being appropriately used. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, yay, one more time to raise our hands. How many of you guys are PDPAs? Fair number of you. You guys know active confirmation is coming up. It's a great time to not only, of course, participate in active confirmation, but to review all of those services as well as users that we have discussed. So again, not only does it impact individual users, but it also impacts all of these batch services as well. So that deadline is December 15th. Also, one more reminder here at the bottom is that you can see those batch services on the organizational profile page. Yay, all in one place, finally. We also have this report, the SECUD3. It's the online user detail report that will give you a listing of all of the users associated with your institution on NSLDS. So this report's actually been out there for a long time, and we just thought it would be a good year to remind you that that report is out there and available to help you complete active confirmation. All right, so it is time for Q&As. We have about 15 minutes left, and you guys always have good questions for us, so we're open and available to take any questions. There's 2 microphones right on either side. Hey there.
Hi. I understand about your security and maintaining the NSLDS identity and all that. Does the department contract out with any outside contractors that assist in maintaining or servicing NSLDS?
Yes, and all of that is available on the FSA the Fed BizOps webpage.
Okay. Are you ensuring that these outside contractors are also maintaining the security of our borrowers and their social security numbers in their database?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
In fact, all of our federal contractors have background checks before they're given access to any of our systems.
Here's the issue I have, and I brought this up last year, is that across the country now, a lot of schools, borrowers are receiving letters from these loan companies that are soliciting them that they're going to get them consolidations and going to get them income-driven repayment plans, loan forgivenesses for a large fee, for thousands of dollars, okay? What concerns me, and I've seen it not only from our borrowers, but from also student borrowers that are transferring into our school that have these letters. So it's private colleges, state colleges, and for-profit colleges. These companies not only have the borrower's name, their address, they also have the exact federal loan balance on the letter.
That is exactly why we had the last 2 slides that we spoke to.
The last 2 slides, yeah, but no. It's not coming from the schools. It's not coming from the loan servicers. It's got to be coming from an outside agency, right? Now, what Jeff said to me last year was that, maybe they're getting it from the credit bureaus, right? Well, to get it from the credit bureaus, you need the date of birth, social security number, okay? So how are these companies receiving not only the social security numbers, the date of birth, but the exact federal loan balance? My theory, there's only one place they're getting it from, and that's from NSLDS.
Okay.
That's the only place they're getting it from.
Great.
So are you doing anything to explore that?
Let me refer you to the last two slides.
Yeah,
And
well,
that
wait a
will-
minute.
that will
Wait a minute.
explain-
My
Wait,
school,
let me
my school
answer.
doesn't have a third-party servicer. We have no third-party servicers, okay? So that's out the window. Third party's out the window. Where are they getting this information from?
Well, that is some of the questions that we're looking at. And some things that we look is that a number of schools are using default prevention companies
Yeah, right.
to
That's
help
correct.
with their student portfolios.
Correct.
And a number of those default prevention companies are using the data to expand. And that is a problem, and that's what we're researching, and that's what we want to stop.
Okay. My school is not using any third-party servicer, okay? And my students are getting those letters with the exact federal loan balance.
So I'll also remind you that third-party servicers have access to all 4 of these things that we've referenced. So that doesn't necessarily restrict a person who has access under one institution from viewing a borrower associated with another institution.
But they'll
Of
still
course,
need to-
you
so-
need to see all of the borrowers that are transferring in. You need to be able to see all that loan history. So we do make that available, but we want to ensure that it's being appropriately used.
I also would like to encourage you to go to the resource room, to the OIG table, the Office of Inspector General, because that issue is a concern of the Inspector Generals, and they're trying to do research. So I encourage you to go to that table and give them some information to help them with their research. We're all looking at this issue, and it is a concern of ours too. So, and we'd like to find the
And
answers.
I referred it to Cynthia Battle. I sent her, documentation and copies of letters also, so.
Yep.
Yeah, but I really encourage you, because they're doing a whole research on this whole issue. We're all concerned about that.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Hi, I just had a quick question, I guess, about how is NSLDS going to be involved in the scorecard? You said that with some calculations.
So the 3 calculations we referenced here, today that data is not necessarily calculated within the NSLDS system. So we're bringing all of those calculations within the NSLDS system in a similar way that we do gainful employment or cohort default rates. We're creating those calculations today within the system so that we can provide schools the complete detail for those.
All right, thanks.
There's a really big white paper out on the scorecard website that explains how they calculate. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I have a couple enrollment reporting questions. I have a couple students that their last day of attendance was the end of October, but then they turned in some late assignments the beginning of November, and November ended up being their grad date. So when I report them to NSLDS, do I report their grad date as their last date of attendance, or their actual grad date, which is November, when they didn't actually have attendance, just assignments turned in?
So I think we would have expected in that situation you report a W as of October and then a graduation as of the date of degree conferral.
There's only a couple weeks in between, so you still want the W and.
So what we'll do there is it's important for 150. If we see a W then immediately followed by a graduation, we essentially for 150 purposes backdate the graduation to the W effective date so that we're protecting the borrower from loss of subsidy as of that earlier date rather than the later graduation date.
Okay, so first report the withdraw, a W with their last day of attendance, and then grad with their actual grad date.
Yes, ma'am.
And then would I also update, because their loan period was based off of the last day of attendance, it was supposed to be their graduation date. So then would I then extend their loan period end date to the new grad date?
I can't answer that question. You're probably going to need COD
COD.
because that's where you're entering in that loan period is within COD, and that's just not my area.
Okay. One more question. For the program level data, we have a couple programs that aren't Title IV, aren't gainful employment. Am I still reporting program level for those students who are on our NSLDS because they had other aids, so they're popping up and reporting their school level data? Am I also reporting program level, even though, again, it's not Title IV or
No,
even-
you're not required to work. That's a very good example where you should use that no program box.
Okay,
If it's a non-Title IV program, but you want to make sure those loans stay in a deferment status, you want to give us, we'll take that campus level with that box checked, and then we'll make sure that, we'll work with the servicers to make sure the loans stay in a deferral status.
okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? If not, we'll be here for a few minutes. Valerie and I have to run to another session soon, but we also have a ton of people up here that can help take questions. Appreciate your time. Thank you.